My name is Trudi Zimmer. I'm a community banker for Natwest Bank. The reason I come to these meetings, as much as I don't have my own business, I very much sort of want to collaborate within the local community. I live in Street and I try and support the local community with regards to financial capability sessions. So that will be something like I'm going to share with you in a moment around how to stay safe from the topical fraud and scams that are happening. Hand in hand with that, I also reach out to young people with financial capability sessions. So I guess the best way to describe it is that I bring to life financial education for them, something that I think is missing within the national curriculum at the moment. So reach out to them in how do they budget, how do they understand a pay slip, what is a bank account, what is debt, and gambling, and all those types of things come to life as well. So I look to reach out within education, schools, colleges, also businesses that may have a handful of apprentices that would benefit from that type of talk. Hand in hand, I also support our vulnerable customers. So vulnerable customers that may be struggling at home for different reasons, or they may be struggling with a bank issue. So they may need to add somebody on as a power of attorney, but actually they're homebound. So how do we go about that? Those are the sorts of things that I would be dealing with whilst working from home. So most of my time is spent on the telephone and doing various presentations. So I absolutely love my job because I love both parts of it. Right, let's just get this going for you. Okie dokie. So what I'm here to talk to you today is the presentation Frauds and How to Stay Safe from Those Frauds. So I would imagine that the majority of you, I would probably say all of you, have had an attempt of a fraud or scam, and probably within the last week or 2 weeks. It's something that's happening to us all, and there's been a huge increase in certain areas over the lockdown period. Impersonation scams have seen an 84% increase, and other increases have been huge around investment scams and romance scams. Those three areas are the ones that we have seen the biggest increase. Reasons for that: so whilst we've been in lockdown, obviously more people have been at home, more people have been using technology. So more people being at home. So I used to say I never got fraud calls, I never got scam calls, but actually since we're working from home, I absolutely know that my home phone does ring. It's just the fact that I wasn't there. So with more people being at home, there's more chance that people are going to be picking up those calls. Young people using technology. So lots of people have been working from home, including the children, while they were working from home. That meant that technology was being used, and young people are being targeted hugely, both through social media, but also through gaming. This week alone, I've had an incident whereby a mum has come through as a referral in connection with concerns around her son, who has been groomed from gaming, but absolutely feels like he's found the lady of his life, and is paying money away. He is a vulnerable lad. So his mum clearly is concerned about that. So we're starting to see a real touch on the lockdown and the outcome of that. So in the UK, you are more likely to fall victim to a fraud than any other crime at the moment. So every evening, I lock my door. Every evening, I put my keys somewhere safe. I'm really secure around my property and how I feel safe. But are we all as secure with regards to our personal details and making sure that we do keep those personal details personal? We've got anyone can be affected by scams. So you could be aged, I know, and sorry, I think it was Peter there who mentioned that he's dealing with customers from the age of 10 right up to the age of 102. And actually the age that you can be scammed is very similar to that. From the age of 12 is the youngest victim that we're aware of that has been affected by a scam. And by that, actually having monetary loss around a scam. And it can go up to any age. but it doesn't necessarily mean that because you're elderly, because you're older, you're going to be more approachable and more unlikely to fall victim to a scam. The likelihood is that you can fall victim at any point. It could be myself, it could be my father, it could be my children. It really doesn't matter. They will target people for lots of different reasons, although they will target people in different areas. So the young people at the moment are being targeted around money mules, which I'll touch on in a moment. The most common area is around impersonation scams. So when I'm saying impersonation scams, I'm very much referring to somebody impersonating a well-known organisation. So at the moment, we are seeing an awful lot of impersonations of police officers and bank officials. And the sort of thing that might be happening is a call coming through saying, Mr. Customer, I'm phoning you today because there's been some fraudulent activity on your account. We'd just like to check that those transactions are correct. And I'm sure if all of us got that phone call, it would make us think, oh, hold on a moment, I'm slightly concerned around that. I've just had a phone call. They're saying that I've got fraudulent activity. I want to check that that's correct. And that can absolutely pull somebody in. That may be somebody who is a little bit more vulnerable. It may be somebody that's just caught off guard, suffering with flu, suffering with an illness. There's lots of different reasons how we can get pulled into these situations. And the main reason is that these fraudsters are very, very good at what they do. It is their job. They train, they sound professional in the way that they come across. So when they're making these phone calls, they will come through. And if we had a phone call like that, if I just put that out, so if we had a phone call like I've just mentioned, how would anybody deal with that? It's frightening how easily this is done. I've got from move on. So if we had a phone call through in connection with, okay, this is your, your bank calling you, and we're calling you to say, oh, there's been some fraudulent activity on your account. How would you deal with that? Would anybody answer that call?
I guess I would. I would try and get a telephone number from them, and with the aim to ring back. But also, I would go straight into my bank account and have a look, because I've had texts of the same thing, and actually that, because fraud has been committed on my account, but it still made me incredibly nervous because I wasn't sure whether I should be ringing the number back to discuss it, and because you hear of all these scams. So it does make you think. You do wonder what's the right thing to do. But luckily, because I went straight into my bank account, I could see that there had been some transactions that weren't mine. So
it's a really good point, and it really highlights digital banking and how quick we can bring up that information and look at that and check things instantly with the advances with digital banking nowadays. If we're asking, so whoever's calling for a telephone number coming back, I would probably say to refer to, so say it was your bank calling and we were asking them for a number to call back, I would always research that number yourself. Bank cards, every single bank card from whichever bank you bank with will have the telephone number on the reverse of that card that you can phone back. So always utilize that. If a call is coming through and that number that's on the back of your card happens to be showing on your phone, if your phone is one that does that, don't necessarily take that as verbatim, because actually the number can be spoofed. And I've had 2 cases over the last couple of years whereby I've seen that can happen, and it is taken that is the bank because that number is showing. So be aware of spoofing and that number not necessarily being the correct telephone number. But how many of you would actually know the voice of somebody from your bank? Would you categorically be able to say, yeah, I know that's my bank. I know that's my bank manager. Some of you may have a really good relationship with a personal bank manager or a business manager, a relationship manager, but the majority of us don't know the voice of somebody from our bank. So what I would say is that phone needs to be put down, and you need to just double check that and do that on a separate telephone. So if they're phoning you on your landline, phone back on a mobile phone or vice versa. Reason for that, just in case that phone line is kept open. And if that phone line is kept open, then it's likely, and again, I have seen this happen, whereby somebody picked up on the fact that the telephone number was showing that it was a spoofed telephone number, and thought, oh, I'm going to double check this, because even though it's saying that I'm sort of picked up that it was wrong, they put the phone down, but they phoned straight back on the same phone. And what then happened is they thought they were going to the fraud department of our bank, and that's exactly what the fraudster knew that they were going to do, and then impersonated the fraud department of the bank. And actually, in that particular case, the money was, by the time we saw those customers in the morning, the money was well on its way to Kathmandu. So it was, you know, a really quick turnaround of loss of money, although most of that did come back, because it was very, very quick in the way that we were able to address it. So that's a little bit around the telephone side of things and some ways that we can deal with that. The other thing I'll highlight just at that point would be around call blocking devices. So I always recommend to people, and to recommend to other people, around looking into call blocking devices, and there's different ones there that you can look into. So it may well be that you do one through your own telephone provider, so BT, TalkTalk. You can purchase them independently. Go into trading standards, have a look at trading standards online, because they quite often have offers on call blocking devices that you can get, and they certainly have a lot of information around them. Okay, over 1.2 billion is lost to fraud and scams in the UK. So that was in 2019, and there's been a huge increase in that. So we are talking a large amount of money. However, only 5% of scams are actually reported. So people feel really embarrassed, really scared about coming forward and saying that they have been scammed, because there is a lot of information around the fact that we shouldn't be giving away our personal details at the moment. And if we do get pulled into that, and that does happen, we feel really stupid and we don't actually want to talk to anybody about it. But what we're looking to do off the back of the presentations that we do is actually say, yeah, that's the right thing to do. Do talk to somebody, even if it's your best friend, a family member, and if you're comfortable, talk to your bank, or phone the police if you need to get in contact with the police. And that may be through Action Fraud, and I'll share those details at the end. So we do, however, prevent more than 500 million in frauds every year. So our fraud department within our bank is the biggest department now. When I joined banking 30 years ago, the fraud department was there, but you know, it's not something that you really heard about. Fraud at that point was adding an extra couple of letters onto a cheque so that a cheque could be paid into somebody else's account. So it was there, but in a different way. And now it is something we deal with day in, day out. Every week I am getting referrals through from vulnerable customers. I've had 3 romance scam frauds in the last 10 days, whereby we're dealing with customers that are being pulled in different ways. 26% rise in money mule activity. So money mule activities. Anybody heard of money mule activity? So money mule activity, I'll give you an example of how it happened, because I actually had my Facebook account hacked about 2.5 years ago, and some of you may have had your Facebook account hacked. And the first thing that I knew that I needed to do was go in and change that password. Ultimately, they were trying to get hold of that password. And once I had that password, they would be hoping that I was also using that password for other things on my device as well. So I was able to do that. However, what I did get shortly after that was a message through. Now, this came through from a friend, or what I thought was a friend. So somebody who I did have as a friend on my Facebook account. And it came through, first of all, just saying, how are you? But then saying, I'm having some problems opening a bank account. Would you be able to help? So at this point, I actually thought, oh, they know I work for the bank. They're genuinely asking me, can I help? I didn't respond. They then sent through and said, oh, with the trouble I'm having, would it be okay if I put £500 into your bank account, and then tomorrow I can give you the new account details that you can move that onto, because I really need to move this money on. You can take £50 for yourself. That's the outline of how money muling works, basically. And if you imagine if I was a student who might be getting that sort of message through, and the thought of, oh God, that's a really easy way to make £50, then that is why there's been such a rise within money mules, mainly around young people. They are targeted because the thought of having quick money and easy money is sometimes, you know, too good for them. What they don't see is the bigger picture, that actually this will mean that I'm part of money laundering, because that money is being money laundered through different accounts. That's the whole idea, that the fraudsters are using that method. And what they don't also know is they're ultimately going to end up with a criminal record of some description, which is going to cause problems for them, quite likely even getting a mobile phone contract going forward. So it's big business with the young people, but it's not just young people with money mules. Older people do get targeted as well. So the fraud and scam cycle. So what do fraudsters want? So ultimately they want our money. And ultimately they want our money through getting our personal details. So when we're talking about personal details or personal information, it could be something as simple as our name, address, date of birth. It could be our financial personal information, which could include your account number, your sort code, your PAN number. So that's the long number around along the middle of your card. It could be your login details, so passwords, etc., for online banking. Or it might even be your password. How do they get that data? So they get that data, it could be through the data being sold on the black market, because that happens. It might be that they pick up on something on social media. So are we being as safe as we possibly can on social media? Are we making sure that our settings are as private as they possibly can be, and that we're not popping pictures that we're going on holiday or taking photos with bank statements in the background, etc.? Are we, when we're getting rid of our Amazon parcels, taking our labels off, or are we still leaving our name and address on there? Or sort of food for thought, because all those types of things are likely ways that fraudsters can get hold of personal details. So once they've got those details, they try and get hold of you, or they try and impersonate you. And I'll come on to that in a moment. This cycle will carry on. They'll continually try and get hold of you. So you will probably find that with the cycle, you will get a period of time where you have lots of fraudulent emails come through or texts come through, and then there'll be a lull, and then it will start again. And that's due to this cycle happening. And they're probably working through a list of some description to try and get hold of your personal details. And at some point, they will be lucky. And I say they will be lucky. So for example, if you're getting the phone call through around there's a problem with your computer, the Microsoft side of things, ultimately at some point they're going to get hold of somebody who actually does have a problem with their computer and are more likely to fall for that particular scam. And it doesn't stop there, because even if you fall victim to a scam, unfortunately, the cycle still continues. So I've mentioned that ultimately they want your money, and they do that through getting your identity, your data. And I will just touch on passwords here as well, because passwords are really the crux of the information they're looking to get. And passwords, and I'll do a little bit in a moment, need to be as safe as they possibly can be. Passwords used to be something that we didn't really think about, and we would very much use something very familiar to us. Children's names, dogs' names, I don't know, where we've lived, places that we like, etc. But now we have to be really quite smart around how we're putting our passwords together, so that it absolutely doesn't relate to us in any personal way. And if I was putting a password together here and now, I would just choose 3 items that may be around me, or maybe what I had for breakfast. So I might have porridge, oat and mug, just absolutely random words. I would be putting numbers in amongst that and characters amongst that, and mixing that up. And I probably wouldn't put capital letters right at the beginning of those words. I would put a capital part way through and link those together. So the longer the password, the better the password. And that's actually from a recommendation from Avon and Somerset Constabulary, because I've been doing some talks with them, and that's their recommendation around how to pull a safe password together. And in a moment, oh, I'm going to show you a site that you can go on to check how safe your password actually is. And it might be something that you just want to revisit off the back of this. So I've mentioned that you can, how do they get your data? And one of the ways I've mentioned that they can do that is by hacking. So social media, get your details and hack your social media details. Another way is through breaches. So there have been numerous breaches in large companies. NHS springs to mind. Some of EasyJet, British Airways had a data breach. But do you each individually know, with regards to your email, if your details have been breached at all? There is a site you can go into, and it's called Have I Been Pawned? And again, I will share this in a moment. And pawned is spelled P-W-N-E-D. And you can pop in your email address, and it will then tell you any breaches that you may have had. So for example, an old email that I no longer use, which is one I will share with you in a moment, I was getting an awful lot of fraudulent emails through on this particular email. And what had happened, there'd been a data breach with a fitness app that I had downloaded back in 2018. So potentially my details were breached at that point. There was also one with Shein. Some of you may be familiar with Shein as a app where you can buy clothes. Again, there was a data breach with that particular company. It's quite interesting to have a look at because it will show you the various places potentially where there could have been data breaches, and it also gives you advice as to things you can do to be safe around that. So I'll share that with you in a moment. So you could unknowingly give away your data. So links are something to be really cautious of. And I always say if there's a link, just step back, take a breather, count to 5 and think, actually, where is this going to take me? Because as soon as you click on that link, you're going to lose control. Up until that point, you've got control in what you're doing. If you're keying in a website address, then you've got control over that. If you're clicking on a link, you haven't got that control. Now, there may be some occasions if my best friend was sending me something through and there was, I was expecting that to come through with a link, that's a different scenario. I'm expecting that. This more refers to something that's unexpected. And if it's unexpected, then actually we need to take a step back. And if I had something come through, for example, HMRC, TV licensing, these are all ones that are known fraudulent emails that are doing the rounds. They will have a link on there, and by clicking on that link, that will take you to a copycat website. You'll be filling in personal details. And of course, as soon as the personal details are grabbed, you're likely to have malicious software put across your device. So please be wary of links, be that on an email, but also on text as well. I've mentioned around willingly giving away details on social media. So at this point, I'm going to share a little video with you because I really like this video around the sort of ways and how easy it is to share your personal information. And I hope this will work. So let me see if we can do this. I'm not sure if it will let me. It's saying that I can't share my video. I'll tell you what, I'll try and do it at the end. I'll go through the whole slides and then I'll play the video at the end. I think that'll be easier than going through everything here. So I'll play the video at the end when I share the various sites, if that's okay, because otherwise, because I've had to join as 2 people to do the presentation. So this here gives you an indication of some of the texts that are coming through at the moment. Now, texts have moved forward a lot with regards, and we call that smishing. And especially through COVID, there's been a lot of plays on what is happening at the moment. So the scammers and the fraudsters out there will very much pick up on the fact that, we're in a pandemic, and they will try and play that to their biggest advantage. So there was text going through in connection with special offers on hand sanitizer, face masks. More so at the moment and more recently was around people being able to get their vaccination earlier than they actually could. So those texts were coming through and people were really keen, and rightly so, to get their vaccination. And they would go into that and even pay. They were asking for personal details to pay so that you could get your vaccination earlier. TV licensing, So a lot of you may have had that come through. There will be a link on there that again will link you in connection with personal details. So fraudsters will either impersonate you or contact you directly. So by impersonating you, they will take your personal information and then try to become you. One of the most recent sort of old school methods of this was taking mail from post boxes. So outdoor post boxes are really quite fashionable now. And in a town a village, not far from here, there was a bout of posts being taken from outside post boxes. So they were getting that even before it had come to the customer. They were then opening bank accounts in various different names. And there was 3 personal loans that were taken out within a short period of time, all within this village. They were actually caught. They were caught by the local police. It was all in the local press around this. But that's what I would call more an old school way of impersonating somebody. The more up-to-date way is absolutely through social media. So somebody could impersonate me by setting up a social media account in my name, pretend to be me, get in contact with my friends and look to do whatever they needed to do in that way. And that's how a lot of fraudsters will try to do that. And then they will link that in with the money mule side of things as well, and a way to launder money. So social media is a huge part of things. And the one thing that I will say, and I know there's a few people on here that can probably talk much more around social media than I can, but it's just about your privacy settings and visiting them and making sure they are as tight and as safe as they possibly can be, and really thinking about what you are putting on social media. So how do we break that cycle? So making passwords as unique as they possibly can. So don't recycle the same ones, don't use the same password for absolutely everything. Think about where you're storing those passwords. Probably not recommended to have a book entitled passwords and then writing Apple password, for example. Although I know people do write passwords down, it's just being smart around the way that you do that, using stars or etc., so that you can maybe have a code that you understand. You've got apps that you can store, so password managers that you can store passwords in, and that just would mean that you have to remember one password to get into the other passwords. Or of course, the devices that we're using nowadays will do that for us. So I use an iPad and an iPhone, and actually Android as well will give you the option to store those passwords on those devices. So if I forget a password, I've got that stored within there, and that will need my face recognition to enable me to get into that. So for me, that's as secure as it possibly will be. So a lot will depend on the devices that you're using, but the standards around the passwords, using 3 words, making that password as long as it possibly can be, incorporating symbols, incorporating capital letters and numbers in there, is the best way to go forward with making a unique password. Okay. Personal information is yours, so don't give it to anyone else. And if someone calls you unexpectedly, always make sure that they are who they say they are. Hang up and call them back from a number that you trust. Think twice about the information you're giving away on social media, and do protect your devices. So keep all your antivirus software up to date. Do your updates when they come through on Android and on iOS, so that those are kept as up to date as possible. I know the signs of money mule recruitment. Don't be one, and look out for young people that you know around that. So this just explains what I mentioned around passwords. So picking 3 words at random, change some of the letters for numbers and or symbols. And you can do that last scenario, which is wrapping. So you can wrap that with the first and the last letter of the website that you are signing into. So that website is Data Cycle, and then you're just doing a wrap there. So those are some suggestions around putting together safe and secure passwords. So this is some information that you may want to take away. If you want to take a picture of the screen, please feel free. If not, I can send this information out to Yvonne so she can share it afterwards with these contact details. So we've got Security Centre, that is the NatWest Security Centre under fraud and security. Anybody can go onto that. And the reason I say that is that it's got information on all the topical scams that are happening at the moment. So it's really useful information on there. The 4 that are listed in the middle there are places where you can get advice. So Get Safe Online. You've got Take 5, which is part of the police to stop fraud. Friends Against Scams. So I'm an advocate of Friends Against Scam. I'm actually a champion for Friends Against Scams. Really great website. You can go on, watch videos, and you can actually become a Friends Against Scam champion yourself if you wish. Got CFAS there. The other one I would put on there is Action Fraud as well. So Action Fraud, if you have an attempted scam, or if you do happen, and I'm touching wood, to fall victim to a scam, then actually Action Fraud are fantastic to call through. They will give you a reference number and look to investigate that within a 3-week period. And of course, you've got Citizens Advice at the bottom there.